Welcome to Caldwell County today. I'm Bill Kincaid, and we seem like here lately we've had a lot of programs filmed on the busy streets of Lenoir. We're on the busy street in Lenoir again this morning. We're on Mulberry Street, and I'm with a dear friend, Ted Seehorn. Ted, thanks for coming along today.
Thanks, Bill. Glad to come.
Okay, Ted, people, 3 or 4 years ago we did program with you and Punk Kincaid about the National Guard that was mobilized in 1940, and you guys all went off to war and stayed 5 and 6 years, and every one of you came home, and then you invited us to your annual reunion one year, and we came, and Ted's done a little bit of everything. He's been a county commissioner and sold trucks, I think, or was it cars back for Irvin Smith?
Machinery.
Yeah. And Ted is only 94 years old. I think he's remarkable. But we're standing here in front of the former W.E. Shaw Furniture Company. I knew this story. We're going to move in a little while to another place that I didn't know the story about. But Ted, tell us about this old building here.
This building here, I do not know who built it, but at one time it was owned by the Hinkle family, a prominent family out of Iredell County, excuse me, Statesville, and they were in the horse and mule business and saddle horse, fine horses. Of course, we got to remember this was about 1890. 92, 93 on up towards 1900. They moved here, had this set up here as a Hinkle Livestock Company. It was the first time that we knew of it. My father and mother lived in Trade, Tennessee, as 3 or 4 years after they were married, and moved here to take a job with the Hinkles. My daddy is bookkeeper and salesman.
Ted, let me talk a little bit about the history. We went through some of the old maps. In 1902, this corner was listed as a livery stable and harness shop, which would have been right in line with what you've told us. 1913, it was listed carriage, and that would have been C.V. Hinkle's carriage shop. 1907, livery stable, harness shop, and warehouse. 1927, is that the year you were born? Did you say?
Far from it, Bill.
When were you born? I got my
1913.
Okay, well I gave the 1913. Okay, 1913, the fire department was right down here. Lenoir number 1, they called it. And then the carriage shop was here. In 1927, this property is listed as auto repair and auto storage. And there was a fire department. The Lenoir Fire Department was 2 doors down, and there was a bowling alley next door.
And in the bowling alley, I can just remember very well as a very young boy, coming with my older brother Bill, who had been in World War I. I think there's only 3 or 4 lanes at the most, and nothing modern. They had a young man that sit up on a little bench up about 3 or 4 feet above the alley, and every time he bowled, by manual, he had to set them on the marks.
I can remember bowling like that some myself.
And sometimes they would deliberately throw as hard as they could and try to scare the boy to death, so they had to change boys every once in a while.
Okay, Ted, I have been lucky enough, thanks to John up at the museum, and one of these I had in my file, but a couple of pictures. This is the corner, this is 1920s, Caldwell Motor Company. Tell me about Caldwell Motor.
The dealer was Mr. Hunt Gwynn, who was a brother to the Gwynn that was postmaster for years. And Mr. Gwynn was one of the family raised here and had that. And later, the other family, the Lenoirs Walt Lenoir worked there too, but it was a Chevrolet dealership at that time.
Okay, well, let's go back though to the days of your dad and C.V. Hinkle, and even after Hinkle went back state for you told me your dad stayed in here, but we had a 3-story building. Tell us about this building.
This is one of the unique buildings in Lenoir, to the fact if anybody coming from the new post office, or you're going west and come up this hill and look on the left, you see this huge steel steps. And to my knowledge, they're originals, which means this building was built before 1900. And upstairs, what that was for, it was for the town of Lenoir. I won't call it the city then, it's for the town, the Opera House. And there's where they had dances, they had meetings of any official type, they had political meetings. When they had a group to come in Lenoir, there's only one good place available, vacant. People climbed these steps, and that was known as the Opera House.
No elevators.
No elevators or nothing. And in 1925, the North Carolina National Guard had not come to Lenoir, but was in Sylva, North Carolina. They couldn't get up enough strength to keep the batteries together, so Cap Williams, city manager at that time, one another, talked them into bringing to the National Guard to Lenoir. Right up these steps they went. That replaced the opera folks, and they stayed there. It was an artillery outfit, but we were headquarters battery. 1925 they moved up, and they stayed 2 years till 1927. Then they moved south on top floor of Sanders Chevrolet in 1927.
And let's go back to C.V. Hinkle's days. He had a livery stable in the bottom floor of this building.
All right, Mr. C.V. Hinkle's family, the Hinkle family, were a prominent family from Iredell County. And before my dad and mother even left Tennessee, they came here to this building, horses and mules, fine saddle horses, buggies, wagons, big outfit. Like you'd refer to now, a huge automotive outfit. Well, that is big in the horse outfit. That's all it was. My daddy, who bought and sold horses, they got in touch with through some reason or other. He came here as their bookkeeper and salesman, and in this building upstairs was where his office was, and behind us here was wagons and buggies that the Hinkles had had. Let my daddy, no doubt, buy all this stuff on the credit. I'm sure he didn't have the money to pay for it. And he stayed here until about 1927, then moved down below the Sanders Chevrolet, right behind the Advent Church, just off of Willer Street. That's where a barn was moved from. That's tying a little bit away from the Hinkles, but they went back to Statesville when they sold to him. And
Ted, I've noticed in looking at the old newspapers, Hinkle would buy 100 horses or 50 horses or Army mules or something. And that was big news when C.V. Hinkle was going to have a new load of horses coming in.
now let me bring you up to date on it. What you say is true on that part, but where I come in, I can remember I was 6 years old in 1919. That was the year after World War
I tried to get you born in 1927, remember?
Yeah, thanks, Bill. 27, I'll tell them all that forget that stuff. I'm young. Anyway, these here in 1919, and these horses and mules and stuff there, they had on it. My daddy had moved down to the other place there, and the Hinkles before him was so big, and they had Blowing Rock was just getting very popular. Sold a lot of fine saddle horses up there, but here I want to tell you one. I've seen it myself. These Pappy Seehorn and Mr. F.H. Finn Coffee, the man that started Kent Coffee Manufacturing Furniture Company, one of the biggest years ago. They went in together in 1919 and bought around 40 war surplus horses. The Army had bought more than they could use.
This was when?
In 1919, the year after the war.
Yeah.
They were surplus ones, so they had to put them up for auction for sales. I don't know where they had the auctions, but they had it all over the country because the Army was always bad about buying more than they could use. These horses weren't broke at all. They averaged weighing from 11 to 1,200 pounds. Some of them never had a collar on them or halter. They kept one or two big mules in this basement down here with the other stuff, good old stout mules. And when the farmer, whoever decided to buy, they put the mule in the wagon, and then 2 or 3 could get one of those wild Army horses, we called them. They was all branded U.S. on the side. And it was a sight to see them go up through Lenoir with all the kicking and bucking and crossways, but they finally broke them a little at a time and stuck with them. They had big stout men. But that was the show of the days. Now we're talking about in 1919, 1920, went on to about 21, about 3 years before they sold out all the ones that they had. But then my daddy then moved down to the other place, and we're getting into another building.
Well, how long did C.V. Hinkle stay in Lenoir?
He came here before 1900 and left here about 1912 to 13. That's right.
Well, why did he come to Lenoir to start with? I mean, of course, Lenoir was a pretty progressive town in that age, where they had factories and everything.
What we figure also, that it was a farming town, a farming county, especially the lower in the county and down on Yadkin River. And the Hinkles had the money, and they wanted, I think the big family wanted to spread out and get some of them away from home in another town.
Let me read something here. Let's get back to the Opera House. Okay, Ted, you've talked about the Opera House. A few years back, I was working on a script for a production we were going to do on the old early theaters in Lenoir. I've never got it done, but I dug out a page of it. It says the Opera House apparently had been the scene of numerous live productions. And this room upstairs was also the scene of Lenoir's first motion picture on July 15, 1908. They called them electrical pictures. And July 28th of 1908, the Passion Play and moving pictures at the Opera House is attracting much interest. It's one of the finest electrical shows to be seen everywhere and should be seen by everyone. And just less than a year earlier, in October 1907, this may help us some, the newspaper story said that the Hinkle Livestock Company is finishing one of the handsomest and most convenient buildings to be found in this part of the country. The first floor or basement is conveniently arranged to stable and accommodate a large number of horses. The firm is at times called upon to handle and stable. And the ground floor is arranged with plate glass front for the accommodation and display of a large line of vehicles, wagons and buggies. The firm carries. Then came a description of the third floor Opera House. And Opera House was a bowling, they danced, they did a lot up there, didn't they?
They sure did, and I started to tell you that years after that, when the Opera House was no longer available and moved in, Stubby Taylor was the orchestra leader here in Lenoir.
I've heard of him, yeah.
And we won't go into another building. You may want to take the log building down below on Harper Avenue, but all the dances and stuff, and that comes on up into the 20s and up to the 30 part. But Bill, it was a show here to see these wagons. Now kids today can realize blood red wagons, 2-horse wagons with steel tires on them. In the 2-horse, they were red. The 1-horse wagons were painted a light orange or yellow. They were Piedmont wagons made in hickory. The red wagons were made in Winston-Salem, Nissen Wagon Company. And the buggies was Tyson Jones from High Point now. So North Carolina had its thing in manufacturing buggies and wagons as well as furniture.
Now, Hinkle and your dad, would they rent horses or mules or sell them? Could you rent a horse?
They only sold or traded here, but remember when I mentioned Blowing Rock was getting in its bloom of really a resort, they put up a stable up there even long after the Hinkles left, my father did, and they rented saddle horses to the tourists and all these people that have them engaged a year.
Well, the Blowing Rock Horse Show is still active. That's a very respected show, isn't it?
It's one of the biggest shows. It's completely separate for a thing like this because it had jumping horses and all, and I attended many of those on that part. But this they did mainly, and also the horses that pulled the hack, they call the hacks that run the Blowing Rock Road, haul passengers and mail, gravel road from Lenoir to Blowing Rock on the old road. And some of those horses were stabled here.
Were you ever at a program in the Opera House?
I never was. Bill, I'm just ain't old enough, for that. Like you said, I'm just
You're just a youngster, aren't you?
youngster. That's too old for me on that. The first one that I've ever attended any of that part was after Stubby Taylor became available in the late 20s. And it wasn't in the Opera House. It was down at the Log House.
Well, you were still just a mere child, weren't you?
A mere child. I was a mascot of the outfit.
Okay, how long when did you say your dad moved out from up here?
He left here about 1925, and about the same time that the Armory headquarters battery was brought from Waynesville and went upstairs. But when he went down below the new police station, and there just below where there used to be Standard Chevrolet, and built the barn and all that, and stayed there as long as he lived. But that still, the Hinkles had gone. I never did know why that they went, and it was an opportunity to him to, I'm sure, by selling to him on a slow credit or whatever, but he made a living at it.
Okay, Ted, let's walk down about two more doors to the old fire department. Ted, the traffic is moving this morning, but we like that, don't we?
Sure we do.
Okay, we've moved down from Shaw's or C.V. Hinkle or whoever, the buggy factory. We moved past the bowling alley. We moved to Lenoir's first fire department here. And I have this picture which shows there was a dome on the building, a bell.
The bell was there. I don't know where, somewhere this fire department's got it now, but I remember so well from the time I was 6 years old. That's the year I started school up here where now the Baptist Church is, First Baptist Church. But I'd stay out with my daddy here at the old W. Shaw building where the buggies and the wagons, and go down where the horses was below, but I couldn't stay away from this fire department. In this building behind Bill and me, the fire truck sit right in the center. It was not a big building. It isn't a big building, but the fire truck, or fire wagon we will call it, was backed in, and the harness hung on hinges or clips from overhead right over on each side of the tongue. At the back of the building, there was 2 stalls and a chain, no door, but a chain across each one of them. And in these stalls was 2 horses. I remember so well. One of them was a chestnut sorrel, and the other one was iron gray.
Okay, I have a picture here, Ted. Hold on just a minute. Okay, Lenoir Fire Department on Marlboro. Okay, go ahead. Tell me about those horses.
All right, and those horses' names was Rex and Ned. And in this picture Bill has here, Mr. Fonz McDade was the fire chief, the fire department. He was the only man hired by Lenoir.
Was he a paid employee?
He is a paid employee, and when that whistle, when the bell rang, Mr. Ed Steele across the street, Mr. Lee Cottrell next door down, Mr. Gene Miller across the street up there, about 6 of them fire department volunteers, when they heard that bell, they come a-flying. And here's the good part about it. When the bell rung, I was up here with my daddy. I'd make a dive to get down here to the edge, not get in the way, peep around the corner, and in the stall, Mr. McDade was trying to get the chains loose, and Rex and Ned were standing there patting their feet all over and listening to that bell. And the minute he got the chain loose, they run to the fire truck wagon, got to their sides, the same one each time, and Mr. McDade dropped the latch from the top, went around for the collars on there, and made a whirl out of there. And by that time, I could see Mr. Ed Steele and Mr. Lee Cottrell and somebody else. Maybe he'd pick up 2 or 3 downtown.
Who are these other 2 fellas? Do you recognize them? One has a 9 on his fire hat.
One of them right here is Mr. Lee Cottrell. Now, Lee Cottrell is the father of A.Y. Cottrell, who was the father of Lenoir Fire Department,
Yes.
if you've ever talked to us, Bill. That could be Mr. Ed Steele. Doesn't he look like a tall man?
Yes, sir.
Mr. Ed Steele was across the street, run a feed store, and stood about 6 feet 3 inches tall. His son, Ed Lee, was in the Army with me.
This looks primitive by the day, and actually Bernhardt and Siegel, well, we had some taller buildings. The Courtneys were already here. They didn't have a ladder company, really, did they?
No.
Well, how did they pump water?
They had tanks with the hand pumps, actual handle pumps on them, and as you could tell by this picture here, there's not room for much stuff on there, but it is strictly just hope and pray and get there in time. But in today's, what you read about it, just couldn't even think.
Yeah, well, we won't get too far into the fire department. We'll leave that for Sam Smith and the chief and some of those folks.
Right.
But you do remember, what was the horses' names?
Rex and Ned.
Rex and Ned. Did they retire gracefully, or did they die in harness?
I do not remember what happened to those 2 horses, because I guess they died of homesickness and sadness when they bought a truck to replace them.
That's right. They put the horses out to pasture.
That's right. I expect they did. They should have anyway, but you can imagine those horses after all these years and listen for that bell and a big old truck run in and replace them. It ain't fair, Bill.
Okay, Ted, we moved back up the former Shaw Furniture. There's some work going on in there. People who from here know, wait, you come up Harper now and turn right at the fire department and come zipping up. The ambulance service there is a parking lot. West Avenue wasn't always there, was it?
No. When this building here, when I was just a young man starting to school, this was a steep hill right here and a heavy gravel on it. And down below where the present fire department, as you want now, you cannot hardly imagine. It was a hole, a hole that must have been 30 feet deep. In fact, all the water and stuff from up in here was down through that. And there was a small road that went back north towards the cemetery. What do we call the cemetery? Bellevue. Went back to Bellevue Cemetery. They had to have one there to that road did. And a very small road here. It was a dead end down here.
Those old maps I found, they show it dead ending.
Is a dead end. Is a dead ending, and down in the very bottom of the holler there was 2 houses. One was a Mr. Lackey, and I don't remember the other one's name, way down in there. But there was no way out, and all those from the fire department and where the trade and loan is, if you could only seen that, even down to Harper School, was just a huge valley of honeysuckles and gullies, because it had never been developed or nothing. And that was all filled in and had a motor company and everything else and built up. But it's
You might say that C.V. Hinkle built on the edge of civilization, didn't he?
where he built is just room for this building. That was all. But truthfully, it was a show to see them. The town kind of quit what they's doing when they knew they was going to break a horse, and they'd go all the way to the, we call the depot, down to the roller mill there, and sometimes they'd get down in the harness and kicked and everything else. But it took that back then to do it.
And that now we're prosecuting Michael Vick for fighting dogs in the town. The Lenoir turned out to watch the horses be broke.
There's one thing that I remember, and they ought to be proud of the people that worked with them. There was no abuse of horses or mules that they worked when all these teams that you saw working through town and hauling. Remember, there's no trucks at all, but you didn't see blood running off of the horse from being beat and anything like that, because it just, in fact, the Humane Society would have got after them then even more than they do now, much less than they do with these prize fighters fight. They took care of the animals.
Did your dad do anything with horses, or is he mainly in sales and bookkeeping?
Well, he did. He not only he was a bookkeeper, and he not only was a salesman, but he never owned an automobile. He drove a buckskin mare that lived to be 32 years old, drove her for 25 years back and forth to town. But he had the reputation of a real good judge of what we call horse flesh, and if he passed his opinion on the mule or horse or what the quality was, well, we didn't have, you'd say, a lot of thoroughbreds, but they were real. They picked good stock, and Caldwell County is well represented with them.
When was your dad born?
He was born in 1862.
But that's during the Civil War.
In Ashe County, and Ashe County, what's the village there, Bill, and the post office, you leave Boone, you get to it. But in Ashe County, my mother was born in Johnson County, Tennessee. She was born in 1872, and Pappy Seehorn was born in 1862.
When did he die?
He died in 1941 while I was stationed at Fort Jackson at the age of 79.
Now we're going to adjourn to the former Lenoir post office. Kay Reynolds had us out. We've done several of our historic shows about the historic district, and Ted, we were down at the post office a few weeks back, and Ted saw that and called me up and said, I helped build that building back in the 30s. So I said, Ted, we got to talk to you some more. So we're going to adjourn to the post office.
Good enough, Bill. I can give you a little more first-hand information. It's more my age, Bill.
Well, that's true, but you've lived long enough to become my authority. Okay, Ted.
But it's been, I think we've covered this one pretty well here, but it's some good history that some of the younger people will pick up from this one down here.
Okay. Okay, we have moved to the former Lenoir post office. Busy street here again. It's one we're trying to shoot across from the sidewalk, not across the road, so maybe the traffic won't bother us. But Ted, I have a picture. I would imagine this was a Dave Rufty picture. It looks like Dave did great work. He had the old white West Avenue sign. Those immediately below us now is it's the county parking lot for county employees. There was still a building in there. What was there?
There was that was Mr. Roby Chris' house. The property joined this post office bought. He was one right next to it. But that is the original picture there, the way it looked when they got through with it.
Okay, tell us your role in this post office. I thought it was interesting.
Well, you know, Bill, kidding a little bit, as we come down through town, well, they got somebody, especially somebody that's not been in the same car regular. So the only thing I've got in Lenoir that I'm real proud of, I said, you see the post office I built? And they said, well, but really, truthfully, I've tried to be truthful on all this stuff.
Well, I've never doubted your truth. Now, your wife told you to tell the truth.
You said, don't make a fool out of yourself and don't tell no lies. So anyway, 1931, I finished high school. There was 11 grades, and I finished it in 12 years. I thought I'd done real well. But the day I got out and come by my daddy's barn, which was right on next to Willow Street, across from behind the Advent Church.
Okay, now he's gone from up at
Yeah, he's been
Hinkle's.
down there for several years. And that his barn had wagons and buggies that he sold. He's getting up in years, but that was like people selling cars. He had on display wagons and buggies. But he said, what are you going to do once you got out? And I said, well, they're building this new post office. I just could go to work up there. He said, well, I'll furnish you a new wagon. Says, pick you out a pair of horses. And I did, and if I remember, they were grading for the basement part. This building has full basement. And remember, at that time, there was
How'd they grade, with drag pans, or did they have any motorized
there
equipment?
was the unusual thing, Bill, not drag pans or scoops of anything. It was single, a man and a long-handled shovel. We had about a dozen of them. We had 4 mules.
That's not grading, that's digging.
4 mules that pulled this huge plow with a heavy thing with a real sharp point and broke it in two. And you turned your team around. There's 7 other teams besides myself. And we turned around in there, and these men got $1 a day. I remember this was 1931. And they shoveled till you filled your wagon. And I've got to tell you, my therapist working on my legs yesterday said to me, I was relating that to him, says, what kind of a dump did you have on the truck or your wagons? And I said, the wagons were made with 9 feet long, the bed was, 42 inches wide, and a 9-inch board on each side. And that would hold 1 yard, and a cubic yard of dirt's about 2,800 pounds. And this therapist says, well, how did you dump it? Well, that is, people that's never been into this, you first took off your sideboard. When you left here, you're sitting on a board, a flat board, and both ends were blocked off. You took the sideboard off, you turned the first 2 before over, dirt started rolling. You done the next that it started rolling. You turned every 2 before over till the dirt was off, took your shovel and scraped it off of the running gears of the wagon and got in.
Where were you taking the dirt?
The town of Lenoir had spots all over Lenoir, up above up above Willow Street and all over Lenoir, North Main, South Main, and there's holes and hollers like we talked about the one behind Shaw. You'd had no trouble dumping dirt. They was glad to have that dirt.
Okay, what materials did you haul from, now the depot's what, about 3 blocks roughly?
Yeah. All right, now we've got it graded. When you got in there, you waited there, they did it in sections, and you pull into where you got right for the fellas to shovel and load it. And now, truthfully, they got $1 a day for a 9-hour day. But then whenever they got just about closed, about finished the grading, this is a huge basement and a good one here, but when they got through with it, this old Englishman, a tall fellow, was the superintendent in charge of the building. And I don't know why, but he said to me one day, he said, I have to have 2 men and a team and a wagon to haul all the building material from the railroad, which is now the old roller mill and Caldwell Building Supply. You know where it is. That's going to come in there, everything, not by truck, but become a train. See,
Well, train was important, wasn't
that's
it?
right. And I said, sir, I'd be happy to have that. I don't remember how long. We worked a long time at getting this basement dug. And I picked out one fellow about a little bit older than me, a good hard worker. And he said, yeah, I'd love to have it. We set in on it. And before we even opened the first boxcar, he said, I want to tell you, young man, one thing. These bricks that we got for this post office is the best we can buy. I don't want to find any of them chipped up and broke. We had a brick hook that would fit over 8 bricks. We opened the boxcar the first day, and what did we see in there but these beautiful red brick, and between every one of them was straw. Straw. There was no broke brick. There's straw. You took the brick hook, and it clamped down over 8 bricks. Brick averages weighs 4 pounds. That's 32 pounds. You carefully took it on your wagon. We unloaded them the same way. They had I-beams, steel beams, 25 feet long, and there's manpower enough to take them out, load them on the wagon. Manpower's up here. Manpower was plentiful, but steam power and machinery wasn't.
How much could your wagon haul?
The weight, it was what you called a 3,000-pound wagon. We could haul more than that, but just like I said, an average load of the dirt was about 2,700 pounds. Average load of gravel is about 3,000. But we had long coupling poles. The wagon could be extended. As I said, some of the steel was 25, maybe 30 feet long. And you carefully got up here, and these strong men with their arms, and they had built up ramps to get on a step higher and a step higher and bolted together.
Well, who loaded it down at the depot?
Not less than 8 or 10 men stayed there all the time. I remember, Bill, it was in the day that manpower was the cheapest thing there was.
Well, these were coming out of the Depression. I mean, it's still Depression, isn't it?
The Depression started, and by the way, while this was going on, the first thought in your mind is, you're thinking now, well, that was the WPA, Franklin Roosevelt. He was still president. I mean, he was not president. Herbert Hoover was still president when this post office was built. And if you'll check your records, 32 is when FDR went in. And I just swore to start with that, talking to people, asked is that way, but the manpower was cheaper, and you could take the $5 and get.
Well, what did you get paid? You providing the horse and wagon and your skill.
This is the part that some of the people maybe that didn't have horses didn't like. They paid me $1 a day, and they paid the horses $4 in the wagon. I got $5 a day.
Now, your helper, did you have to pay him, or did they pay him?
They paid him.
They paid him $1.
$1.
So you got $1.
But I slipped him always a little extra.
But you got $1 for you and $4 for your horses.
When I got that and was working full time, 5 days a week, from Monday through Friday, and got that
That's $25.
I thought I was the richest son of a gun in Lenoir.
And it was Dad's horses and wagons.
But this man was well liked, but he watched everything, and piece of marble or whatever type of stuff is finished and all. And I believe Mr. Hunt Gwynn was the first Clark Smith was the first postmaster, and then Mr. Hunt Gwynn. My brother Bill was here for years.
Okay, was West Avenue paved, or was this street paved?
It was paved with a rough type blacktop. It was not a pavement, but it was a rough type blacktop. And as I told you, that my daddy would drive right where we were standing within 20 feet, Bill, and stop his buggy and the buckskin mare. If it was raining or snowing, he got out and get his mail, and when he come back, Buck was still standing there, and when he picked up the reins, they went on. But that was, every dog in the country started running the buggies, but there wasn't no cars to bother you.
Well, you remember, though, I suppose, when a lot of the streets weren't paved, don't you?
Yeah, I can remember when it was plumb gravel. But when the first 1907, you know, history tells you that the high school was built up there, right where the First Baptist Church was up there. And I went to school there through the fourth grade. Then in 1923 or 4 is when they moved into Willow Street.
So how long were you occupied at the post office?
We was here for over a year and a half.
So you were knocking down 25, but you had to feed the horses out of that now.
Absolutely, but we fed them the finest Timothy hay that was shipped from Ohio and Illinois. It come in big, heavy bales at Mr. Ed Lee Steele's place with wire bales that weighed about 160 pounds. And when we were working, during the dinner hour, we always put a block of hay up on the chains between the horses to eat and offer them a bucket of water. Our dinner was usually carried in a Cairo syrup bucket, and it might be fatback, and it hardly ever ham, but there'd be a jelly biscuit and things, and we thought nothing about it. And we had an old canteen that Brother Bill had brought back from World War I, and so that was. But we thought we was having a hard time, but we was working hard, but enjoyed it too. I never saw any trouble, any arguments or anything, disagreements, rarely ever with anybody.
Well, I guess a lot of people are so glad to have a job in that day and time for $1 a day even, that they didn't want to fight.
It's true. And and of course, after FDR come in, there's so many more programs and got like your CC camps and all the other things, many things there. But Bill, do you reckon the generation now could went through another depression like that?
I don't know. I really hope we never have to find out. And I know you hope. I know you're not bragging by going through it.
No,
but
I'm not, but I don't. Well, it would be such a complete reversal. It'd be terrible on it, but there we gradually worked into it after the Roaring '20s, you know. We didn't mention down at the other building about the Roaring '20s.
Yeah, well, you perhaps may have some stories you don't want. Your wife and your daughter also told you this morning, Daddy, now don't embarrass us.
Yeah. Don't make a fool out of yourself, Ted. Well, how can I make anything else?
Okay, Ted, so what did you go to after this?
Okay, Bill, we finished up here in 32. I went back to farming, and farming lived on Seehorn Street. Now she thinks it's right in town, but it was out of the city limits.
Is that Dad it's named after?
Mammy.
Mammy
Seehorn, named after her. And it's a nephew, Hugh Mundy, and his wife Phyllis. We let them have a lot that the old house that I was born in and their house is built on that spot. There was 10 in my family, and one girl died as a baby. And out of the 9, I'm the last of the Mohicans.
Well, we hope you have a lot more years. 94 is good age, but we hope you do well. Okay, Ted, what else?
I want to say one thing that you all know. You might not trust me on everything that I say. You know that Bill Kincaid is honest. And he had my age 17 years newer than what it was, and don't forget it. So let's remember that when you see me.
Okay, instead of 94, you're 77. Okay, Ted, anything else about either one of the buildings? I know we've talked about an awful lot in a few minutes.
You don't want me to mention, you don't want me to mention the one that replaced the Opera House.
Yeah.
In 1935, and Bill, you can stop me if you want to. In 1935, when FDR was in and WPA, they decided to build another, I would say, civic center. You'd call it now then what would be now Civic Center. If you people remember, as you go down East Harper, heading west from Lenoir to East Harper to the stoplight at Hospital Avenue, There's a building there. On the right, within 30 feet or 40, you'll see that huge log house that's got the trees in front of it. Then, under WPA works, they built that for a civic center.
Did you have a hand in that?
I had a team I had a mule and a horse together to make a team. They hired me. Then the WPA boys, plenty of them stayed. I hauled every log that's in that building. It's big. It's a big log.
A big building.
I hauled it all from High Brighton Mountain, not the top of High Brighton, but as you know, you go to the south and go up the ridge, about 3/4 of the ridge. The government had about 10 men. There was no power saws back then. 10 men with axes, wedges, and cross-cut saws. And there was a man there to tell them to cut the lengths that they took to build it. It had to be built precise. I hauled them back on the wagon with the wagon coupled out, and the men up there would lock the rear wheel with a chain so it'd slide. Team couldn't run away with me till I got to level ground. Then I'd take it loose, and when I come there, the group there would pick up the logs by hand and lay them on 3 sawhorses, wooden sawhorses, take drawing knives, take the bark off, put a treatment on the slick wood, and it's ready to be done. It finished up in 1937. And there's where Stubby Taylor, I mentioned before, Stubby had started in the early 30s or 29, but there's where there's pictures. There's a picture in the Lenoir High School book on it, big there, and his orchestra made up of people that you know, Jim Farthing, Hal Marley, lots of folks, which all originated from Captain Harper's band. But Stubby Taylor was in big demand, and the orchestra, they had the nicest things in the world. But that's about the only building in Lenoir I can tell you that I helped build.
Well, we won't, and we've already done the show, but you left, you joined the National Guard, came out and, yes, how much you make as a National Guardsman?
You made $1 a drill night, which seems $1 a day, or if you worked a day, when you joined as a private. I joined in 1929, and I told them that I was 16 years old, and they put down 18, which made it legal.
Well, if I'd, according to my calculation, you were 2 years old, weren't you?
Yeah. And so you people go along with this bill, and me intentionally do not mean to mislead you in any way.
We're both getting older, aren't we? But anyway, as I said, we've done the piece before, but you camped out down, the Guard was activated, you went off to war, you became a major, you spent 30 years, you came back as a career National Guardsman, didn't you? And I thought it's always interesting, you were on Kenyon when the Enola Gay was in training and dropped the bomb on Japan.
One of the men, a close friend of mine, said, no, it hadn't been long ago, he said, Ted, how come Captain Porter to pick you out to go to OCS? I said, I never did know until I got in training up in studying the Air Force armament, and I found out that they just needed bodies in the place of brains, and I passed.
Okay, Ted. Ted's had one of the most interesting lives of anyone I can imagine. He's just seemed like he's done it about all, and I appreciate him coming out. It's starting to heat up out here, and Ted's got his jacket on so it gets cold. But I just thought a lot of you would like to see the history of this building, and then I knew his relationship with the former Shaw Furniture Building, and we wanted to tell it to you this morning. We're so thankful, Ted, for coming.
Thanks, Bill. Enjoyed it a lot. Anytime with you.
Okay. Thanks for watching Caldwell County Today.
But let's go ahead and begin looking at Smith's Crossroads. Now again, we've shown most of these pictures before, but I know a lot of you probably are going to be seeing these for the first time. So Joe, the very first picture we're going to look at is, what do you think? These are aerial views. These were taken from an airplane.
Oldest one I know of.
All right, so this is actually Smith's Crossroads as it was at that time, and the big house there in the center of the picture,
That's Irvin Smith.
That's Irvin Smith's
That's where the
house.
Crossroads got its name. And this square building,
The square
is
building,
the original garage.
Okay, so the square building to the top of the picture above the house is his original. Well, no, he was in town and then he moved.
Then he was in town, the present Western Automobile, and then he moved down here. I think it was 45, I believe
Yeah.
his daughter told me.
So this picture we're looking at right now,
It's
mid
close
to late
it's
40s.
close, yeah, it's late 40s.
Okay.
Now that's the next one. The next oldest one that I know of.
Okay, so the garage is no longer there, or the garage has been
It
added on
is.
to.
That's the original garage right there, and then they just added to it.
So they've added a restaurant
Restaurant, and then
and
the motel in the
a little
back.
motel back there in the back. So this
And
is,
the lower part of this has never been filled in. It's still just a big bank all the way around.
yeah, so they just brought in a bunch of dirt and filled in around there. Irvin Smith's house is not
Is
shown here, but it would
Yeah.
be right off the
Yes.
the right side of the picture. So if you were looking from right to left, you would be traveling north.
This is going north, left.
From
Out
right-
here is going to Wilkesboro.
Yeah, the road that goes up the picture is headed toward Wilkesboro. Now here's a much better
That one,
shot of the.
That's about the same time. It's just from a different angle.
Yeah, so again, the original garage is
It's there. That's part of it.
there
the original.
on the left side, and to the front of it was
They added on.
added
And on
in.
the right side is the restaurant.
All right, so this was a car dealership, a garage, a restaurant, and motel.
Motel in the back.
Okay.
Then, this picture, they made a circle. They done away with the crossroads and made a circle, which was way wrong. It just didn't work out at all. And it's still Irvin Smith's house is here. The garage and all that. It's the same thing as the
Yeah, the
with
picture that
crossroads.
we were looking at just a moment ago, not much has been done in the way of house
All that's the same.
or building. It's all the same. The only change is the crossroads
Made a
was
circle.
changed into a circle. About what year, Joe?
I don't know. I don't know
Okay.
that.
I guess if we could get a better look at those cars down there, we would know, but hard to tell from here. And again, if people are looking at the circle and we're looking up the picture, that would be traveling north up 321.
That's 321 North.
And Joe, do you remember how long the circle was in place before
No,
they
I don't remember.
decided that was a mistake and they put the crossroads back in it?
That's the same picture, same time,
Yeah,
but it's just from a different angle.
And again, looking up the picture,
Yeah.
that's headed toward Wilkesboro. I don't know, hard to tell. Some of those cars look like early 50s.
That's probably about right.
But what's surprising, Joe, in all the pictures that we've looked at, we know Smith's Crossroads today and all the traffic associated with it, and all the pictures that we've looked at
There's
so
no
far,
There's no traffic.
there's no traffic.
There's nobody
On
there.
this one, we do have one car, I guess, just coming out of the circle, and then there's one further up the road headed toward Wilkesboro. But in the pictures that we've looked at so far,
That's the motel, which
so this is taken probably from Irvin Smith's front yard.
front yard, that's where it was. You see, all of this is gone. None of that's there. Every bit of it's gone. Irvin Smith's house, the motel, all of the garage, all
Yeah,
of
so
that.
actually, the restaurant that we're
Restaurant
looking at
there.
now is, I guess, Burger King sits right
It's
in there
about where
somewhere.
Burger King's at. All of that's gone.
And again, hard to tell from these cars. Could be, again, early 50s.
They're in the early 50s.
Looks like a 53 Chevrolet sitting there.
This is dedicated to my good friend Ted and all the years we worked together at Smith Crossroads Ford. May God bless and keep you and your family, Ted. This is where Ted and Ruby Seehorn live today, 322 Sharon Avenue. This video has been converted to digital from a VHS tape. In the future, I hope to convert more of these old history videos. Please support our Caldwell Heritage Museum, 112 Baden Street, Lenoir, North Carolina, 28645. Thank you.